So, picture this. You've just achieved independence. It's an incredible moment. But now you have this monumental task of building a modern economy, pretty much from the ground up. That was the huge challenge facing India back in 1947. So, how on earth did they do it? Well, let's dive into the blueprint that really shaped the nation's industry and trade in those first critical years. Really, it all boiled down to this one single question. How do you take a brand new, massive, and incredibly diverse nation and turn it into an economic powerhouse? Every single policy we're about to look at was an attempt to answer that very question. So, let's get into it. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the blueprint itself, the big picture strategy. Then we'll look at the agricultural foundation that everything was built on. After that, we'll see how new industries were forged, what kept them running, and finally, what it all meant for the people of India. First things first, the blueprint. You see, before you can build a single factory or plant a single modern crop, you need a plan. India needed a strategic vision, the right institutions, and clear policies to guide and finance this massive undertaking. You know, what's really striking here is just how quickly they moved. Get this. Just 1 year after independence, in 1948, the government sets up the Industrial Finance Corporation. Why? To provide the big, long-term loans needed for major projects. Then, just a few years later, they launched the Industrial Development Corporation to kick that growth into an even higher gear. And by 1970, the policies were getting so specific that they were defining what heavy industry even meant, laying out clear rules to attract serious investment. But here's the thing, you can't have an industrial revolution if you can't feed your people. It's that simple. So the next absolutely critical piece of the puzzle was modernizing agriculture, which was truly the backbone of Indian society. And just look at this number to understand the sheer scale we're talking about, 70%. Let that sink in. That's how many people in India depended on agriculture for their jobs, for their livelihood. This wasn't just a part of the economy. For most people, it was the economy. Any plan for the future had to start right here. This really captures the whole approach perfectly. You know, it wasn't about just throwing out the old and bringing in the new overnight. Nope. It was a dual strategy. You support the traditional farming methods that millions of people relied on, while at the very same time, you start introducing modern machinery to boost productivity and get more out of the land. And that support went way beyond just providing a few tractors. This was a full-on 360-degree strategy. The government made sure farmers could get loans. They set up study visits to share knowledge. They supplied better seeds and tools. But just as importantly, they invested in people, training them in things like soil testing and in infrastructure, like helping them build warehouses so their hard-earned harvest wouldn't go to waste. Okay, so with the agricultural base getting stronger, India could now really shift its focus to forging new industries. And this is where we see this incredible diversification of the economy, creating a really broad and dynamic industrial landscape. Let's start with a real heavy hitter, textiles. This one industry alone accounted for a whopping 14% of all industrial production. And just like we saw in farming, it was a mix of the old and the new. You had modern power looms churning out fabric, working right alongside traditional hand looms, which were absolutely vital for providing jobs to millions. I absolutely love this term. The automobile industry got nicknamed the sunrise sector. It just perfectly captures the feeling of optimism and the forward-looking energy of the time, right? This wasn't just about building cars. It was about signaling a new, modern industrial dawn for the entire country. And if you need any proof of India's growing industrial might, look no further than this. This fact is just wild. At the time, India was producing 1/3 of all the tractors made in the entire world. It's the perfect example of how industry and agriculture were completely linked. One sector was literally building the machines to modernize the other. This table gives you a fantastic snapshot of just how diverse this industrial push was. It wasn't about just one or two big things. India became a top-ranking producer of traditional materials like jute, but also a major player in modern essentials like cement. It was a huge exporter of leather and one of the world's biggest producers of salt. So what's the big takeaway? This was a broad, multi-front effort, building strength across a whole range of sectors all at once. And this is so important. This industrialization wasn't just happening in the big cities. The Khadi and Village Industries Commission was created specifically to empower rural areas. The whole idea was to develop local handicrafts and small-scale industries, using local resources to create jobs and make villages more self-sufficient. It was a real grassroots approach to growing the economy. So you've got your farms and your factories. They're up and running. But what fuels them? Our next section looks at the inputs and the outputs, the resources and the trade that kept this whole economic engine humming. To build up your industry, you need the right tools and materials, right? So India's key imports were basically the essential building blocks of a modern nation. Machines for the factories, iron for construction, oil for energy, fertilizers for the farms, and of course, medicines for a growing population. And here's the other side of that coin. To pay for all those essential imports, India exported what it produced well. That included classic agricultural goods like tea, coffee, and spices, but also you can see the new industries kicking in, with value-added products like cotton textiles and leather footwear. But international trade was really only part of the picture. A country as enormous as India needed its own strong internal trade network. You can think of the railways, the roads, and the waterways as the arteries of the nation, pumping essential goods like coal, cotton, and food all across the country, connecting everyone into a single economic unit. So, we've looked at the blueprint, the farms, the factories, the trade, but now we get to the most important question of all. What did all of this actually mean for the people of India? How did it change their daily lives? And really, this is what it all comes down to. Behind all the complicated policies and the 5-year plans, the goal was actually incredibly simple: improve the standard of living. Building industries and modernizing farms wasn't just some abstract economic exercise. It was about creating jobs, opening up new opportunities, and paving a real path to progress for the entire nation. All of these policies laid a seriously powerful foundation, and they really set the stage for decades of growth that would follow. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to ponder, doesn't it? With these foundations now firmly in place, what would the next chapter of India's incredible economic story look like?